Good day. My name is John Aaron, and I'm here with Mr. Clarence Modeste, the president of the Staten Island Cricket Club. They are celebrating the 150th anniversary this year. But we'll get into the Staten Island Cricket Club and the 150 years of cricketing in the New York metropolitan area. But I want to get a little into this fascinating character that is Clarence Modeste. Um, I am very intrigued by the gentleman, his ability to articulate a point very clearly and effectively, I must add. So, Clarence, tell us a bit about yourself. Where were you born? That sort of thing.
Quite happily, I was born in rural Tobago, um, where I grew up with my parents and siblings. Um, my first exposure to cricket uh, was what one might call a semi-primitive cricket facility, cricket ground on the estates of one of the former planters. This would have been a slave holder in Tobago, and I was about 5 years of age. I started going to school when I saw my first cricket ball and handled it, and it was a softball, of course, as children want to play with soft balls so they don't get injured. And I don't know that anyone can actually explain what it is, but there is this fascination that people, and I'm no exception, um, have with certain things. And one of them for me has been cricket. And it's no less fascinating now, even though I no longer can play, than when I was 5 or 10 years of age.
Right. But I know your sport for cricket your love for sport goes beyond cricket.
Oh, very much so. In spite of the fact that I've played cricket all my life, I've also engaged in a number of other sports. For example, I've played tennis, I've played squash, I've kicked the football a bit, um, I've skied, I've learned to ski downhill skiing on the snow and really liked it. Had some great fun doing so. Um, so sports in general, and even sports that I've not played, I'd like to watch. Field hockey, for example, or lacrosse.
And I,
Uh,
I know in our earlier conversations, particularly with regard to skiing, your skiing has not only been limited to the continental United States, you've skied afar and abroad. Can you
yes,
tell us a
I've,
bit about that?
yes, I have. I decided to take wings and and fly to Europe, and so I've skied in the Alps, not the Austrian Alps, but I've skied in the French Alps, the Swiss Alps, the Italian Alps, and I've also skied in the mountain on the French side between Spain and France, the Pyrenees.
Wow. I think that's a whole lifetime that I am still to fulfill. My skiing has been relegated to Snuggler's Notch. And
Ah,
that's that. I haven't gone beyond Snuggler's
that's
Notch.
that sounds like a pub.
Exactly. Well, there was a pub associated with it, but we won't get into that. There's always a bit of warmth
Yes,
associated with skiing and snow, right?
yes, indeed.
Um, so your passion for cricket is undoubtedly a genuine one. But having started playing cricket, you've been involved in the administration of cricket. You've been a club president for 40 plus years. What is it about cricket off the field that drives that passion for you to be part and parcel of this great sport?
I became attracted to the history of the sport, its genesis, and why it is that so many people around the world, um, especially the subcontinental people, but everywhere that cricket has taken root, there are people who become totally fascinated by it. And I remember when I was young, listening to some of the old men who would sit down and talk about cricket for hours on end. I didn't have the sort of brain, I suppose, to remember all the facts that these guys remember. They'll tell you exactly who went to bat when, who bowled whom, with which ball in the innings, in the over, and things like that. But I found the game sufficiently interesting, especially its long history. And so I have stood, it has stood by me reasonably well, and so have I. I didn't mention this earlier, but I've made quite a number of cricket tours myself. I've played not only in Trinidad and Tobago, I've played in England, I've played in South Africa, I've played in Australia, I've played in New Zealand, and it's been all wonderful.
Fascinating indeed. Before we get into the history of the Staten Island Cricket Club, I want to leap forward and say, now that you're celebrating your 150th anniversary, what's in the immediate future for the Staten Island Cricket Club beyond, or for the next 150 years? What do you envisage it to be?
Well, we would like to, one of the reasons we are trying to raise funds for the club is that we would like to reimagine the club, the facility at Walker Park to some extent. It's been somewhat limited in recent years. The development of a housing project on one side of the club has limited us to batting at one end only because of the risk of sixes being hit, and we concern ourselves. We worry about will the ball hit a child or an elderly person and do real damage, apart from the physical damage to the glass windows on the buildings, that sort of thing. We'd like to do something or have something done that would prevent that from happening, and that we can bat from both ends again. We'd like perhaps to lay down a permanent artificial turf wicket. Originally it was a regular turf wicket. Now we play on a mat. And that sort of thing. We'd also like to have practice nets.
I've seen the clubhouse at Walker Park, and it's fashioned after the English Tudor style houses, I believe.
It is without doubt a Tudor style house. My speculation is that after the clubhouse burned down, but the cricketers were still playing at Walker Park, that the city officials at either New York City or on Staten Island consulted with the cricketers as to what sort of building, what they would like the building to look like. And I think the cricketers may have given them the sort of instruction that resulted in this, not only Tudor style building, but the style of building that's a clubhouse with
a veranda and stuff, foreman,
a small veranda, a away team room where they can change, where they can have showers and everything like that, and then a hall in between where you can have meetings and you can have lunches or dinners,
banquets,
that sort of thing.
Yes. Do you see the Staten Island Cricket Club in the next 150 years moving away from Walker Park to a larger facility?
It's
larger
potentially
ground?
it's possible. It's possible.
Is there that kind of land space available in Staten Island?
Well, that's the problem with the city in general. The lack of land, the lack of space, the lack of park land. And is the land available on Staten Island? There is some land, but availability not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah.
Well, Clarence, Modeste, I am so intrigued by you and your involvement in cricket. I feel in many ways that you could have very well have co-authored the book with Joseph O'Neill called Netherland. I think that was published in 2008. He writes about the immigrant coming in and playing cricket in Staten Island and so forth. And I think there is so much enshrined in Staten Island and in the Staten Island Cricket Club that we have still not yet tapped into. But I appreciate you coming on to talk with us today. So now that we've gotten through the small talk and the introductions, let's get into the meat of the reason why you're here to talk about the 150th anniversary of the Staten Island Cricket Club. Are you up for that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, we'll do that in a moment. We'll be right back. Here we are with Mr. Clarence Modeste, the president of the Staten Island Cricket Club. And this year, 2022, the Staten Island Cricket Club is celebrating 150 years. Nothing to quite sneeze at. 150 years of playing cricket. And they boast that they have played cricket every year since being formed in 1872. Clarence Modeste is the president of the Staten Island Cricket Club, and he's been the president for more than 4 decades. That's quite longevity in itself. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Modeste here with us today as the club celebrates its 150th year. And I will be asking Mr. Modeste a couple of questions in this in 25-year segments. So the first 25 years, we'll go into a bit to see what were the highlights, what were the high points of the club's history during that period of time. And then we'll talk about the second and third and fourth and fifth up to 2022. Now, Mr. Modeste, it's a pleasure to have you. The Staten Island Cricket Club was formed in 1872, March 22nd, I believe, to be precise, in 1872. And during that period of time, the club has always been in Staten Island. You were originally formed by a group of Britons, as you would like to refer to them as, the Wall Street traders, so they had some deep pockets, and they formed the Staten Island Cricket and Baseball Club. Ironically, the baseball club would become the nucleus of the New York Giants that moved to California. So that's putting it in historical perspective. Mr. Modeste, would you be kind enough to share with us 1 or 2 highlights within the first 25 years? That will be 1872 to 1897.
Yes, I'll be happy to. I believe that the first highlight, of course, was the founding of the club itself. It was at a time when cricket was just beginning, perhaps, to fade in this country, shortly 10 years or so, a decade or so after the Civil War. But it was also a time when outdoor activities, sports in particular, had gained a lot of traction in this country. And there was a widespread belief that outdoor activities headed by sports was good for one's health and well-being. And the Staten Island Cricket Club was founded in this era, and this acted as an impetus and attraction to the club, so that within the first decade of its founding, the club went from the founders, which were probably no more than 30 or so people, to a membership of 500. The club played its cricket at a place called the Flats, Port Washington, which is very near today's Staten Island Ferry. Club played the cricket there for the first 13 years, and the club found that it could not build a clubhouse on that property because the property was owned by the railroad and they would only lease it and not sell. So the club moved to what is now called Walker Park 13 years after 1872.
So
Yeah.
your club was, you actually bought a piece of property, I believe it was 5 acres.
Just under 5
Just under 5 acres for $40,000
Yes.
from the Delafield.
From the owners of the Delafield estate.
Delafield estate.
Yeah.
The club paid $40,000 for, and that was in 1870.
13 years after 72, that would mean
1884, 85, thereabouts.
Yes.
All right, so and that would be a lot of money in today's dollars.
Indeed.
But then fast forward, that property was sold. It was acquired by the Staten Island Academy, an academic institution.
Yes,
What year did they acquire it?
that was sometime in the 1920s, and we are not exactly sure either of the specific year date or the terms of exchange of its moving from the hands of the club into the hands of the academy.
Okay, but it was subsequently sold by the Academy to the City of New York for about $110,000.
Yes, we have some documentation
And
of
that
that
was in the
transaction.
1930s?
That would be the late 1920s, the early 1930s, yes.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to the first quarter. Now, the club is formed as a Staten Island cricket and baseball club,
Yes.
but tennis was an integral part of the club's activities, was it not?
Indeed, tennis was. When tennis was brought to the United States by the daughter of one of the prominent club members, a gentleman named Outerbridge, the club changed its name from the Staten Island Cricket and Baseball Club to the Staten Island Cricket and Tennis Club. And tennis took off and became wildly popular on Staten Island and in New York.
Correct. Now, tennis is introduced. Obviously, it was played by a lot of Europeans.
Yes.
Or Eurocentric Europeans, I would imagine. So we didn't have an infusion of colored people, so to speak, until later, about 100 years later, you would say?
Not quite 100 years later, but considerably later.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Yes, there were not that many people of color, especially from the former British colonies in the United States, in the New York metropolitan area, who would have the time and the wherewithal to join sporting clubs.
Okay, well that would explain it, right?
Yeah.
Because you went within that first period, 25 years of 1872 to 1897,
Yeah.
you had about 30 members. But you recall to me in our discussions that you went from 30 members to more than 500 members in a matter of 1 to 2 years.
Yes,
But
brief, yeah.
But they weren't all cricketers.
No, there was there was a large. The club was heavily social and not all sporting. Although the club indulged in many sports, quite a number of sports: cricket, baseball, tennis, golf, rowing, football, soccer, that is.
Wow.
And lacrosse and others.
Well, that would explain such a large increase in the membership because you had a variety of interests there. But I know in 1886, you played a match against the inaugural match against Marion Cricket Club. They're out of Philadelphia. And then 125 years later, you celebrated the 125th anniversary of that match. That was very significant because at the time, cricket had already taken hold in the United States, but you weren't playing in organized leagues quite yet when you started. And as you recall to me in our earlier discussions, there was a group of white Americans within the Staten Island Cricket Club who had their own cricket team, right?
Yes.
Was there a particular reason why you had white Americans playing against the British within the same club?
I believe the reason is that the Staten Island Cricket Club was open to membership by from any group, any nationality, any color, any race, as we would call them today. So that later on, when there were more migrants from the subcontinent and from the Caribbean, there was no difficulty in our becoming members of the Staten Island Cricket Club. The club's arms were always open to membership of anyone who wanted to play cricket or just wanted to become a member of a sporting club.
Well, that's pretty fantastic. Now let's move to the second 25 years. That will be between 1897 and 1922-23 then. First World War.
Yes.
Any cricket played?
Yes, cricket was played, and one of the things the Staten Island Cricket Club takes pride in is that we have played cricket every year since our inception until today. During the First World War, the naval vessels came into New York from the Allies, especially from Britain, came into New York Harbor to be refitted, and the sailors and soldiers on the ship, fighting men, would get a break. And the Staten Island Cricket Club, with its British roots, the president of the club would contact the British civil authorities in New York, the consular authorities or embassy authorities, and they would get a hold of the sailors on the ship, and they would organize a cricket match, complete with tea, as they would as the tradition
Right.
of cricket goes. And so, even though no full cricket schedule was kept, a few matches were played each year during World War One.
Well, the New York Metropolitan and District Cricket Association, now familiarly known as the Metro League, was formed in 1879. That's 132 years ago.
May I interject?
Beg to differ?
1890.
Oh, well, I'm going on the records that
Yes.
the league might have had. But in 1890,
Yes.
the Staten Island Cricket Club, you were saying that you were one of the founding members of the league.
Yes, there were several attempts made at the formation of cricket leagues in the New York areas in the years between 1880, between 1880 and 1990. But the first successful one was the formation of the New York Metropolitan Cricket and District Cricket Association,
Okay.
Cricket League, as Metro League, as we now fondly know it.
Mhm.
It became the first successful league in the United States, as far as we know. Unfortunately, we don't have a list. We have no records of the number of teams that were in that first league, the number of members of each team, or anything like that. But what we do know is that Staten Island was one of the founding members.
Correct. Now let's jump back in time as we go in time travel back to 1844. There's the first international sporting event between Canada and the US at cricket in Manhattan. Were members of the Staten Island Cricket Club part of that American 11?
We believe so, but we can't prove it.
That's because you had a fire.
Yeah.
You had a fire from the club, where the clubhouse and a lot of its records were burnt down. And that fire occurred soon after Sir Donald Bradman had visited the club and played at the club in 1932.
That's correct.
Question is, did he leave a cigar somewhere around lit?
We don't know. It's under investigation.
Well, the club burned down, and so was a lot of its records at that point in time. You have since become sort of the chief historian of the club, and you are collecting information. So anyone out there listening to this or viewing this broadcast, if you've got any information, as insignificant as you may think it is, concerning the Staten Island Cricket Club or cricket in America, you can get it to Mr. Modeste, and certainly he will add it to his historical records.
I will be most interested in any records of anyone.
And I know that you have pursued this because you actually found a picture of, you came across a picture of, go ahead.
Don Bradman?
Don Bradman.
Yes, I received a telephone call one day, and this lady, kind lady in Texas, said to me, my grandfather played cricket for the Staten Island Cricket Club. Are you familiar with, are you associated with that club? So I introduced myself, told her who I was, and I said, she said, I have this photograph of Don Bradman and my grandfather and the two teams sitting in front of the clubhouse, would you like a copy of it? And I said, we'd absolutely welcome a copy of it. And so she dutifully made a nice copy and sent it to us, which we highly prize.
Right,
And yes,
that's exactly how you go about collecting historical memorabilia.
precisely.
Because it's not always in one place. You get it from various entities and you put it together.
Similarly, and I hadn't said this to you before, we received a phone call one day, and it was from the lady who runs the Staten Island Museum. And so she said, "Are you Staten Island Cricket Club?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "We just received a cup, a silver cup, and it has stamped on it the Staten Island Cricket Club. It seems as though this cup was won by some team visiting Staten Island and playing cricket. Are you interested in seeing it?" She said, "We want to keep it in the museum, but you are certainly welcome to come and take a look at it." And so myself and two of the other officials visited the museum, and we saw this silver cup, which was the trophy for a significant match played by a touring English team to Staten Island back in the day.
Wow.
And so, yes.
That's interesting. The Staten Island Cricket Club has been, well, it's part of history and has actually played a role in historical events. For instance, you guys participated in the first national tennis tournament in the United States, long before there was a tennis stadium at Arthur Ashe Stadium in Flushing and that sort of thing. So that's a significant plus. I know that a movie was actually filmed at the Staten Cricket Club starring Sir John Barrymore. It was called The Raffles, the Amateur Cracksman, I believe, or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
So there's a lot of historical perspective associated with the Staten Cricket Club. Let's jump into, we're into the second 25-year period, and you're now part of the Metropolitan Cricket League. You're playing organized cricket. You're competing very well. And throughout the First World War, 1914 to 1918, you actually continued to play cricket in spite of the war. Obviously, you guys weren't called up. I don't know. If you go to the third period, which would be 1922-23 to 1947, thereabouts, the club ran into some issues, management issues. Can you speak to that a bit, financial or otherwise?
Well, I could speculate to some extent. There are a few documents that indicate that the club may have run into, pardon me, into both financial and managerial issues during that period. The club seemed to have been unable to manage its affairs, and so ownership of the club went from the club itself to an organization called the Staten Island Academy. That's a well-respected educational institution on Staten Island, and the club the club property remained in the hands of the Staten Island Academy until the late 1920s or the early 1930s. During those years, the club continued to play cricket. We believe that the club played cricket at Walker Park all of those years, and if not, it actually continued to play cricket elsewhere. We can't say where because we don't have the proof at the moment. But the academy apparently took care of the property, and eventually the property was purchased, in fact, from the academy by the city of New York, whereupon in 1932, whereupon it became a public park.
That's a pretty significant occurrence within that third 25-year period.
Indeed.
So we move to the fourth 25-year period, 1948 to 1972. You've joined the club now. Did you immediately become president, or you were part of a minority group within the club at that
Oh,
time?
very much a minority group. When I joined, the club was, I'll say, 90+% white. Mostly English, but not all English. There's smattering of Australians, maybe a South African or two, a couple of New Zealanders, etc. But gradually, between 1960 and 1980, in that period, the club's minority population grew, and the white population declined. The membership in those days was around 70 or so, gradually dropped to about 60. 5 or 10 members were non-cricket players, but the majority played cricket, and played a lot of cricket.
So you went from a high of 500 plus members to 60 or 70 members.
Correct.
But that can be attributed to the fact that now your total focus was on cricket and not baseball and tennis and all the other Eurocentric sports, so to speak, at the time.
Without doubt.
Yeah.
Without doubt.
So now you become a full-fledged cricket club, around 60, 70 members, most of them being cricketers. That was a significant change.
Well, also reflected in the changes in name. At first, the Staten Island Cricket and Baseball Club, then followed by the Staten Island Cricket and Tennis Club, and eventually simply the Staten Island Cricket Club, which is what we are today.
Wow. So, and now you're a majority of colored players, so to speak, to use
yes,
that term.
Yes.
And made up of players from which countries around the world?
From a lot of countries. The subcontinent, we are made up of players from the Caribbean, more than one island, and Guyana. We are made up of players from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. We are made up of players we have English players, and we have an American or two.
So you would say the club is more representative now of the cricketing diaspora?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
By far.
So,
yes.
And that has certainly showed a change in the times that we are living in, and what has since happened since then. Now, I know when the club was formed, and in 1886, when you played against Marion, there were four other teams in the Philadelphia area: Marion, Germantown, Philadelphia Cricket Club, and Belmont. And those were the four teams that the Staten Island Cricket Club would have had friendly rivalries with, competitions or tournaments.
Serious competitive, but non-league cricket.
Okay, gotcha. Serious competitive.
Yeah.
Well, Belmont is no longer around.
But also exciting and very friendly cricket. There are notes that indicate that Staten Islanders look forward to spending a weekend in Philadelphia and playing one or other of those clubs, and how enjoyable those trips were.
So in 2011, as I recall, you played, that's 125 years after you played Marion in 1886.
Yes.
You played an anniversary match. Were the other teams involved? Philadelphia and Germantown and stuff in that?
No, that was Marion only.
Okay, so that was 100 years after, I believe.
125
years after you had played Marion, right?
Yeah.
But that was your 100th anniversary.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that made sense.
Actually, we have played both. We have played Marion individually, and we have played the Gentlemen of Philadelphia separately. Should explain that the term Gentlemen of Philadelphia, shortened to GOP, which is not to be confused with politics, but
with the Grand Old Party.
only cricket here.
Yeah.
The Gentlemen of Philadelphia originally was formed and continues to be by the four teams named by our host here. Um, Philadelphia, Germantown, Marion, and Belmont, which has since disappeared. Um, they put together this Gentlemen of Philadelphia as a touring team. And so that team used to take trips to England, to Ireland, to Australia, etc., etc. Um, I myself had actually gone on one of those trips, not back in the 19th century, but in this century, to Argentina under the hubris of the GOP, the Gentlemen of Philadelphia. And I think one of the questions that is uppermost in our minds at the moment is, what are we doing to celebrate our 150th anniversary? So I'll let our host.
So, and here we are.
Yeah.
Now we are in 2022. It's 150 years after the formation of the Staten Island Cricket and Baseball Club, that has seen some changes as we discussed over that 150-year period. We discussed them in the 25-year segments to bring us up to speed. So now we're 150 years later. Clarence Modeste is still the president, has been the president for more than 4 decades. And by default, I believe, as most presidents tend to do or want to do, have become the historian of the club, collecting all memorabilia from far and asunder that has to do with the Staten Island Cricket Club or cricket in New York in general. Because I'm sure cricket in New York can benefit from your collection, your curating of such memorabilia. This year, the 150th anniversary, what are the plans for the Staten Island Cricket Club?
Well, we are working. We've got one large committee and a couple of 2 or 3 smaller committees working on plans to have some sort of significant events that would mark this 150 years. The first one would be somewhat smaller than the second, but the first one would be a women's cricket tournament to take place on the holiday weekend, Memorial Day, in this month of May. And so we'll have at least 2 women's teams competing against each other at Walker Park on that Saturday and Sunday of that weekend. The second event, which we expect to be considerably more sizable, would be held on the weekend of the 16th and 17th of July. And on the Saturday, we are planning a significant cricket match. Its significance is truly historical, because we shall have, as you've heard us mention before, the Gentlemen of Philadelphia come to play the Staten Island Cricket Club at Walker Park once more, 150 years later. And on the Sunday, we plan to have an old-timers Staten Island cricket match against a Staten Island team. And on the Saturday night, we hope to have a nice reception where everyone can drink to the club.
A very important part of the cricketing sphere. Interesting that you mentioned, as part of your 150th and your Sesquicentennial celebrations, a women's cricket match, because women's cricket seems to be coming into its own in the United States now. In fact, there are 4 United States women from the United States national team playing in 4 different teams, I believe, in the Fair Breaks tournament for women in the UAE at the moment. So women are coming into their own. And so I must give credit to the Staten Island Cricket Club for involving women as part of their celebrations, as part of the acknowledgement of the growth of the sport in the United States and within the cricketing diaspora here. So congratulations to you, Mr. Modeste, and to the Staten Island Cricket Club for its longevity. May, as I say, may God continue to smile upon you and give you many, many more years. I know that you are certainly an integral part of the organization, and I know that Dr. Balkasuran, Dr. Kumar, Balakrishnan
Balakrishnan.
is the co-chair for the Staten Island Anniversary Celebrations Committee, and I'm sure with your support, he will indeed ensure that all things go off smoothly and well.
Yes, there are two co-chairs, Joseph O'Neill and Dr. Balakrishnan. Yes, of the committee. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish the Staten Cricket Club and yourself God's health and good wealth. That's part of the parcel, and that you have a fantastic celebrations. Thank you so much, Mr. Modeste.
Thank you very much. You're very kind to have invited me to this talk. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah.